So aging and senescence. This is the definition. Aging, whatever may be written here, just simply say that aging is a process where the physiological function keep on decreasing, or their efficiency also, get decreases with respect to time or with increasing time, and that affects the normal cell behavior, and that ultimately leads to the aging and senescence process. There's many factors which are responsible for this process. We're going to discuss all about them. First one is your DNA repair enzyme. The more the DNA repair enzyme, the more efficient they are, the lifespan of an organism also be higher. Is in this picture you can see too young, very young, but appearing as a very old indeed. They are affected by a mutation that cause those repairing enzyme to become mutated, and that leads to aging process very faster. This is called Hutchinson-Gilford progeria disease. In this picture, in this graph, you can see here the DNA repair enzyme, their amount and efficiency is very important, because in case this, you can see the lifespan of elephant and human is much higher than that of your mouse and rat. This is because organisms like your human elephant has a higher amount of and a higher number of those repairing enzymes, so that any kind of mutation that occurs due to stressful conditions, they will able to repair those DNA, and this way they are minimizing, they are changing or decreasing efficiency of physiological function with time. That leads to this aging process, as I have shown in this definition, that the physiological function time related. With time, this function is not occur in a proper way. It keep on reducing, and the slower they reduce, the more will be the lifespan. And the repairing enzyme, this DNA repair enzyme, has a very important point, an important function to minimize those changes. The second one comes as your reactive oxygen species. Well, the reactive oxygen species is a compound. You can see here written that the damaged cell membrane is called the cell membrane to damage, protein and nucleic acid also damaged in presence of those compounds. And the oxygen atoms, which is taken up by the mitochondria during this process of metabolism, when it's insufficiently reduced, this produce this highly reactive chemical compound like hydroxyl peroxide superoxide, which affects those nucleic acid proteins, membrane structure, etc., and thereby they are affecting those physiological function. So to minimize this, we need enzymes like your catalase, superoxide dismutase, glutathione, etc., which will minimize this reactive oxygen species in the cell, and thereby least affect those physiological function, and the aging process will be slower. So higher the amount of those catalase and superoxide dismutase, the higher will the lifespan. In some organisms like where the larval form are not able to get proper food nutrition, in those conditions they produce higher amount of those enzymes, so that the slower metabolism which produces those kind of reactive oxygen compound will be able to minimize, those enzymes will be able to minimize those gross reactive oxygen compound. The next point comes as your telomeres and p53. P53 is a translation factor, which is a tumor suppressor gene, protein. So whenever there's any kind of DNA break, or any kind of changes in this DNA, like Dalton breaks or whatever maybe, and this p53 gets activated, and it halts the cell cycle to prevent from any kind of cell cycling. Undergo any kind of cell cycle process. And in telomere, if any kind of telomere region get break and is unable to repair it also could lead to the apoptosis process, and in this way it's caused aging process faster. Now the apoptosis, so it's very important that we must have a functional good p53 transition factor, because it will prevent those any kind of changes in the DNA and allow it to repair itself. Then the next one is your telomerase. Because the telomerase helps to retain the length of this DNA during each cell cycle, so it's a very important enzyme, and in this way it will prevent the deletion of terminal deletion of telomere region, and in this way it helps to prevent the functional genes to prevent from deletion, and in this way the telomere is really very helpful in maintaining the aging process. And as you can see here, the overexpression of this telomerase enzyme reactivating in senescent cell extend the longevity of the mice without increasing cancer. So it simply means the more the enzymes will produce, the more will be the lifespan. That's it. Then the next one is the aging and the insulin signaling cascade. Why it's important? Because insulin signaling cascade is very important, as I have mentioned in somewhere above, that the reactive oxygen compound, we have also some relationship with that of your insulin signaling here also. In the larval stage, you can see here in this larval stage, when there's a very less amount of nutrition is in surrounding, or if there will be very high in their population density in those regions for the larval, then there the downregulation of this insulin signaling pathway could decrease some metabolism process, mitochondrial elotrophin system cycle also reduced, and many other things like your deep DNA repairing enzyme increases, antioxidant like your that I mentioned, like superoxide dismutase, etc., increases in amount, and that prevents from the organisms to aging. That means aging becomes slower. So it's simply just if I could be able to draw this in a better way. For example, this is an insulin signaling process. So when it decreases because of some environmental factors, not proper nutrition, diet if not present there, then it will decreases. As it decreases, it causes aging process to become slower. The reason is behind is this, because the metabolism becomes slower, the mitochondrial transportation elotrophin system also becomes slower, the reactive oxygen species which is produced to minimize the effect, the antioxidant will be more in amount, then there also be repair enzyme also be more in number, so that there will be higher lifespan, and also there is decrease in fertility. So there are some points which is very important and related to that of your insulin signaling cascade process. In this down regulation, there is some factor that has been discovered which has some important role in this aging process. As you can in this picture, you better see this, that is some insulin signaling protein, insulin signaling pathways where DEF2, it is a transition factor which is required for insulin signaling. Whenever there is insulin signaling, then the DEF2 will be higher in amount, in number. So with the decrease in insulin signaling, the DEF2 also decreases, and that leads to the increase in your DEF16. This is a forehead processor factor, and that leads to the increase cellular lifespan. It increases the lifespan of the organism, and the organism will live longer. That means to simply say that in diagrammatic way, I think better. This is insulin signaling. It decreases. There's no insulin signaling because of some nutrition maldeficient or etc. That's cause this DEF2 to becomes decreases. Once the DEF2 decreases, it's and it is the DEF2. The DEF2 here is the inducer. It is a inhibitor. This DAF2 is the inhibitor of DAF16, like the, yes, this one, the DAF16. It is the inhibitor of DAF16. So as there is no insulin signaling, so this will also not there, and it will not there. That means the DAF2 is free to activate itself. I mean, it's get activated because the reducer is not here. And after that, the lifespan is your increase in those conditions, because all those process like metabolism, etc., are becomes stopped. So this is the reason and the relation between how the insulin signaling cause increasing lifespan. Another one is a calorie restriction, is another way of downregulation of insulin pathways. So it's better if you consume less food as required, consume less caloric food, less protein food, so that it will also, I mean, there's also a possible chance that it will be cause affects those insulin signaling, and you will live longer than normal. And it is not, yes, have not, etc. Okay, so then thing is your mTOR signaling pathway. You might have some idea about this mTOR signaling pathway. The mTOR signaling pathway cause the cells to cycle, I mean to proliferate the cells. But whenever this mTOR pathway, I mean mTOR signaling is down regulated, in those conditions the organisms will be live longer. You can interlink this mTOR pathway in here also. For example, let me draw this. Okay, so here is the insulin signaling pathway. It's affect this DAF2, DAF16, and it's cause lifespan to increase. So it's down, it's activated, and this cause lifespan to increase. When the insulin signaling is down, in those conditions, what exactly happens? The mTOR signaling pathway is also down regulated, and this leads to this cell cycle to stop. The normal cell progression becomes stopped. So this is how this mTOR signaling is related to lifespan aging process. So the lower the suppress the inactivated mTOR, the more with the lifespan. That is the conclusion in the mTOR signaling pathway. Nothing else more here. Then the second one is a chromatin modification. Chromatin modification is a methylation of DNA and histone. So with aging process, the methylation is keep on increasing. So it's very important to maintain the enzyme which is responsible for this process, because the enzymes like your DNA, I mean histone deacetylation, histone methylation, still transferase enzyme, etc. Those enzymes which are responsible for this kind of process must be effective and work errorlessly, because if they are errorful, because one more thing is that like DNA repair enzyme, those methylation process is very also important, because those methylation will lead to the activation and the suppression of your gene, a target gene. So it's very important for those enzymes to be act properly. That we will see here in this epigenetic drift region. I mean in this point, you can see here the methylation is increases with age, and that is very problem. Not all those cases. Here example is given as the estrogen receptor, which promoter get methylated, and that leads to very severe smooth muscles and blood vessel genes to becomes inactivate, and that leads to heavily affects many kind of diseases related to that. In this picture you can see here the methylation with age is increased, and stem cell aging is a different process. Stem cell aging is the simplest point in this here. I would like to tell that the GDF1 paracrine factor, this is a factor which is found in blood, which helps to rejuvenate the normal stem cell production, because the older you are, the lower you will have those GDF11 factor. This factor will found is found more in younger individuals. In younger, for example, in this experiment here done, the young mouse possess higher amount of this GDF11 processing factor, and that helps to rejuvenate those brain nerve cells to, the niche, to help to repair and properly allow those stem cells to proliferate, differentiate, renewal itself. So when the cells from the younger mice to transfuses to those of your older mice, it's found experimentally that the error, the brain that make mistakes is decreases because of this transfusion of blood from the younger to the older mouse, because this blood possesses more amount of GDF11 transcription factor. So how the question is, it could be, in this region you can see, is that a part that aging syndrome cause is by declining the function of a stem cell. That means the function of a stem cell is decreased, or is that the declining ability of stem cell niche which supports them. So as you can see here, the GDF11 is transfused along with that of blood, but here the transfusion is only occurs of the blood, not the stem cells from the younger to the older mouse. So the blood has something, that is your GDF11, not the stem cell. So this GDF11 goes and helps those niche, the stem cell niche, to provide their ability to function properly. So the answer is that the GDF11 helps the stem cell niche and allow those stem cells to proliferate, renew, differentiate. So it's important that in stem cell, to properly rejuvenate, the GDF11 should be there in more, so that the aging will be slower. As in young mice, it's found more in amount. So this is all about the aging process. There's some exception, like your hydra, you can see that they can rejuvenate themselves to again new growth, new organism itself to form from the older one. It's kind of reproduction, and aging is mixed. I don't think it's a proper way of okay, whatever, maybe. Thank you very much. It's getting longer, my video.